I made a video some time ago in which I argue that not only is there no evidence for God's existence, but that the very idea of the Judeo-Christian God is self-contradictory and incoherent and therefore impossible. Essentially, my argument was that since God is timeless, as William Lane Craig puts it, that is, he can exist independent of time, then God is a self-contradictory concept because existence itself denotes temporality. If you say, for example, that something exists for 0 seconds, that is exactly the same thing as saying that it does not exist at all. Conversely, to say that something does exist is to say that it exists for a period of time and that it exists in time. This fact renders the very concept of a God that is timeless inconceivable and meaningless. This is a position that's called theological non-cognitivism. But a response that I have gotten to this from many theists and even some atheists is that just because something is beyond human understanding does not mean that it cannot exist. And I think this is a point worth addressing, because I do believe that the rules of logic are not rules that describe the universe per se, but rather rules that describe what the human mind can digest. And as such, if something is incoherent and inconceivable to us, it does not necessarily follow that it cannot exist in reality. But it does nonetheless mean that the statement God exists cannot be true, because it is incoherent and essentially meaningless, and meaningless statements cannot hold a truth value. If I say there are no married bachelors, no one's going to argue with that, because the very concept of a married bachelor would be incoherent. It contradicts itself. Bachelors are, by definition, unmarried. But you can use this same rebuttal against that statement. You can say, well, just because you can't conceive of a man who is both married and not married at the same time and in the same respect, doesn't mean that the statement married bachelors exist cannot be true. Well, actually, that's precisely what it means. The statement married bachelors exist, because it is self-contradictory, because it is incoherent, it cannot be true. It is a statement that is meaningless. For a statement to be said to be true or false, it must first have a meaning. Take this random jumble of letters. If I were to say that this random jumble of letters is true, I would not really be saying anything. Because these letters do not form words, they don't represent anything that can be compared to or contrasted from human experience. They do not represent anything conceivable. Self-contradictory and incoherent statements are equally inconceivable, and as such are equally devoid of representational content. Because they don't hold any meaning that the human mind can grasp, one cannot even begin to investigate whether these statements correspond with reality or not. The truth of such a statement cannot be investigated rationally and certainly cannot be investigated empirically. The statement God exists cannot hold any truth value. Now, there may be other conceptions of God that are coherent and that do hold representational content. But the God of the Abrahamic religions, insofar it is considered to be an entity that created time and as such is capable of existing independent of time, is incoherent. I refuse to apply the term agnostic to myself, because that implies to me that the term God exists could possibly be true, but because it has no meaning, it cannot. If you want me to believe in that God, you're going to have to do more than just provide me with evidence. Because before you can even do that, you're going to have to provide me with a definition of the concept of God that has some meaning that can be either compared to or contrasted from the evidence. If theists can't even provide people with that, then their lack of evidence is the least of their problems. In the absence of a coherent definition of God, it would be no easier for me to believe that this statement is true as it would for me to believe that this statement is true.